We could not have been more wrong about the Saints. After last week, it really felt like the big story in week 1 was just that the Saints weren't good, but the Panthers were just truly awful. Now it actually looks like, yeah, the Saints are actually pretty good. Both of those things can be true. And the Saints being good feels just weird. The Panthers are not a very good challenge, and so it was really hard to evaluate, but the Cowboys were supposed to be decent or good, and they were coming off of a win against the Browns, and maybe the Browns are bad too, which is completely possible, but the Saints have officially proven themselves. They are a good football team. They beat the hell out of the Cowboys 44-19, scorigami, and it was a thoroughly dominant performance in every single way. And honestly, this was an incredibly exciting offensive game. There literally was not a single punt in the first half, and the Saints scored a touchdown on every single drive in the first half. They had 5. The Saints quickly drove down and scored on the first drive of the game, capped off by a 5-yard Alvin Kamara touchdown. And wow, he had quite the game. You're going to hear plenty about Kamara throughout this entire week. The Cowboys responded with a field goal, and then literally on the first play of the next drive, Carr just threw an absolute nuke to Rashid Shaheed, 70 yards downfield for a deep touchdown. And then hilariously, the Cowboys go down and hit another field goal on a long drive to make it 14-6, only for the Saints to score on another huge play, a 57-yard catch and run for Kamara. No matter what, it just felt like the Cowboys could not stop the Saints offense. But the Cowboys did answer a bit. Dak Prescott, he had a huge 65-yard touchdown to CeeDee Lamb that made it 21-13. And suddenly it was a one-possession game. You know, anything could have happened. It just didn't get that close again. Instead of scoring off a big, insane play, the Saints actually then put together a really good drive of their own. Kamara capped it off with a 12-yard touchdown. Also, his 3rd touchdown of the game. Dak followed it up with a really bad pick that led to a Carr punch-in, and the Cowboys tacked on a field goal before the half to make it a little better, but that is 35-16 at the half. Not a single punt, and 51 points were scored combined in that first half. Just absolutely insane. A wild first half, and it felt like the Cowboys had to come out really strong. The Cowboys had to come out of the gate and score, and they did tack on another field goal, but man, I'll tell you what, the Saints just couldn't stop scoring no matter what. The Cowboys defense just couldn't stop them. You know, they were supposed to have this insane defense and be really good, and you know, maybe it does hurt, you know, losing guys like, you know, a Dan Quinn who was the defensive coordinator. Now Mike Zimmer's there. It was really bad, and it did not look like last year's Cowboys defense. Kamara ended up scoring again, another touchdown, his 4th, to make it 41-19, and this was just an absolute blowout. And that was it. Just an absolutely embarrassing, brutal, crushing loss for the Cowboys, and Dak ended up struggling. You know, he did have almost 300 yards and a touchdown, but those 2 interceptions were pretty bad. You know, they hurt a lot. CeeDee played well, I thought, 90 yards, a touchdown. Jalen Tolbert, I think, was a really good 6 passes, 82 yards. But the big issue when you watch back the game just was the rushing game, because the Cowboys could never get it going. They trailed by so much so early that they couldn't even establish a run game, and they only ended up having 21 carries over the course of the entire game for 68 yards. There was just no way to run the football because they did have to play catch up. Then, of course, Carr had 243 yards, 2 touchdowns. He did have a pick. Maybe not the greatest statistical game, but I thought he looked fantastic. Carr has been dealing to start this year. Kind of looks like the old Derek Carr. Rashid Shaheed had 96 yards and a touchdown. Chris Olave had 81 yards. And then, yeah, Alvin Kamara. He did it all. A truly vintage Alvin Kamara performance. 20 carries, 115 yards, 3 touchdowns, and he had 2 catches for 65 yards and a touchdown, just turning back the clock and looking like his old self, and that is great news for the Saints. Suddenly, the Saints are 2-0 and actually look like a really good football team. Last week, it was just hard to evaluate them and how good they actually were. They obviously look good. They crushed the Panthers, but it was the Panthers. You know, they were supposed to be one of the worst teams in football, and they looked every bit like it again this week with a 26-3 loss to the Chargers. So the Saints were supposed to beat them bad, and they did. They were not supposed to beat the crap out of the Cowboys. Dallas beat the Browns in week 1, who might also be bad, but the Saints dominating the Cowboys was definitely a shock on Sunday, and it leaves a lot of questions for the future of both teams, really. The Saints are at least a good team, that seems clear, but how good? The NFC South has looked pretty good early on compared to what was expected. That was definitely the worst division in football last year, and if the Saints are actually a competitive, solid team, add them to the Buccaneers, who are already 2-0, and Baker Mayfield is dealing, the Saints and Bucks could be in a serious fight for the NFC South crown, and it's possible the Falcons even get back into it too, but the Panthers are not going to be in the conversation, I'm willing to bet, but it's still looking like a very good division race that will actually have some good teams. The Saints have definitely already exceeded a lot of expectations for this season, and I personally just love what I've seen from Derek Carr. He looks like a different dude from past seasons. I mean, we have seen flashes of 2016 Derek Carr from back before he broke his leg, which I definitely didn't think we would ever see anything like again. It's cool to see him have this resurgence, and of course, it helps having some good weapons around him. Chris Olave is a great young wide receiver who's already proven to be good, and then Rashid Shaheed's a speedster, fun player to watch, and you have Alvin Kamara, who is also having this return to form season. There is at least some semblance of credit that you have to give to Dennis Allen. It's his third year as the Saints head coach after taking over after the Sean Payton brief retirement. The Saints went 7-10 in his first season back in 2022, and then improved to 9-8 last season. This would be a great season to make an actual jump if they can win double-digit games. It does help that the Saints have a pretty solid defense too. You know, there's some really recognizable names on that defense. Edge rusher Cameron Jordan, linebackers Demario Davis and Willie Gay, and then Tyrann Mathieu at safety and Marshawn Lattimore at cornerback. There are some serious pieces, and if the offense can keep clicking, keep an eye out on the Saints. But really, I want you to keep an eye out on Clint Kubiak, the Saints offensive coordinator. It's starting to feel like he's not going to be with the Saints very long. He's bounced around in recent years after he was with the Vikings for a minute, but he's been the passing game coordinator for the 49ers and Broncos in the past 2 years before now. He obviously got to work with Kyle Shanahan last season, and now he's proving himself alone already this year with the Saints. And personally, I would not be surprised if he's getting calls and being like the next big guru like Dave Canales was last offseason. The Saints are going to have to answer the call with a few interesting matchups coming up, but it'll give us a better idea if they actually are good or if this is just a weird fluke. They host the Eagles next week, which should theoretically be a good team on paper. They have some serious playmakers. The defense should have a tough time stopping the Eagles with Jalen Hurts and A.J. Brown if he's healthy. And then you add in Saquon Barkley into the mix. It's definitely looked like the Saints could win that game, though, based on what we've seen. Then New Orleans has to play the Falcons, who have had some big questions, mainly Kirk Cousins' health. And then there's Monday Night Football. Huge matchup at the Chiefs, October 7th. I don't expect them to win that game, but by then, we're going to have a good idea of whether or not the Saints could actually be a serious postseason team. And right now, I'm ready to go ahead and call them a sneaky playoff team. Even after last week's domination of the Panthers, I don't think a lot of people were expecting them to even beat the Cowboys, especially, I wasn't. That's changed with a big winner over Dallas because I think the Cowboys are a good football team. I don't know if I'm right, but I feel like I am now. The Saints have essentially proven it now. And there are a lot of reasons to be excited in New Orleans. I still don't expect them to be a serious contender, but it's great that they're already playing good football so early. A lot of their players are older, so it does kind of raise a lot of questions about the future, but I think the Saints are already trying to plan ahead. And I'm a huge fan of Spencer Rattler. He went in the 5th round. He was supposed to be Caleb Williams before Caleb Williams. I think he could have a future with the Saints, even as just a decent quarterback. I liked what I saw in college at times from him. He just does need it to develop, and so it's perfect for him to be on a team that could be good, and he gets to sit behind a good vet like Carr, but we're not going to see Rattler anytime soon. Derek Carr is dealing, and the Saints are already 2-0 with back-to-back dominant wins. Things are going very well for the Saints, at least for now.